Hello everyone, welcome to Sunday School Class with Ricky. I'm Ricky Williams. This is our 10th lesson in our series on Bible biographies. Let me give you a quick heads up. We have planned 2 more lessons after this one. So 3 remaining, this one, and 2 others to come, which will make 12 lessons in all. Also, a little change, the final 3 lessons, including today's, will be different from the previous ones in that each lesson will be looking at more than one person. These persons will, of course, be connected in some way. Today's lesson will also be different from all the other lessons because for the first and only time in the series, today's subjects will be women. So, today, we look briefly at the lives of 2 sisters mentioned in the book of Acts. These are Drusilla and Berenice. The Bible does not tell us that they are sisters. The book of Acts basically just mentions them and mentions their name in passing. So we actually don't have much information about these 2 sisters from the Bible, but we do have some details from secular historians. Drusilla, and is given as Bernice in the Bible, is properly referred to as Berenice. That's the correct Jewish name or pronunciation. But they are both mentioned in the book of Acts as persons who were present at the trials of the Apostle Paul. This is found in Acts 24 and 25. These 2 are the daughters of King Herod Agrippa I, and so would have been born into a life of privilege and power. Another heads up, we will be looking at the story of Herod Agrippa I in our next class, which will be our penultimate class. So, just to give a context around which these 2 ladies are mentioned in the Bible, is all in the context of the trials of the Apostle Paul. So as you recall, Paul has been arrested in Jerusalem just after completing his 3rd missionary journey. He is eventually taken to Caesarea, some would pronounce it, for trial before the Roman and Jewish authorities. Caesarea there being the Roman headquarters in Judea. Firstly, in Acts 24, he appears before Felix, who we spoke about in an earlier class as well, and Drusilla, where Paul preaches to them the gospel. Secondly, in Acts 25, Paul appears before Governor Porcius Festus along with the Jewish king Agrippa II and his sister Berenice. So, with that context, let's look at the lives of these 2 sisters. Let's study together. So let's first start with Drusilla. She is mentioned in the book of Acts chapter 24 from verses 24 to 27. And I'll read those verses for you. It says there, "Some days later, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him speak concerning faith in Jesus Christ. And as he discussed justice, self-control, and the coming judgment, Felix became frightened and said, 'Go away for the present. When I have an opportunity, I will send for you.' At the same time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul, and for that reason, he used to send for him very often and converse with him. After 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and since he wanted to grant the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison." This is taken from the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. And you can see there the story. Essentially, Paul was being interrogated by Felix with his wife Drusilla present. So Drusilla appears as the wife of the Roman governor Felix during Paul's imprisonment in Caesarea. And this is around, and estimated to be around AD 57 to 59. Drusilla would have been approximately 20 years old at the time. We'll give you her approximate year of birth shortly. So she is present when Paul is summoned to speak about faith in Christ Jesus. The text notes her Jewish heritage, but it does not record her personal reaction to Paul's message, although it does mention the reaction of her husband. So, what was her family and early life? It is estimated that Drusilla was born in 38 AD, which would have made her, like I said, about 20 years old when that trial was taking place with Paul. Drusilla was the youngest daughter of Herod Agrippa I. He ruled Judea from AD 41 to 44, and her mother's name was Cypros. Her siblings included Agrippa II, Berenice, and Mariamne. So they were part of the Herodian dynasty. And you know from the scriptures, the Herodian family was very deeply involved with the political and religious affairs of first century Judea. Drusilla's first marriage came in AD 53. She was about the age of 14. She married a man called Gaius Azizus, who was the king of Emesa, which was in Syria. He actually agreed to be circumcised for the union, even though he wasn't a Jew. This marriage apparently was arranged by her brother Agrippa II. In 54 AD, Felix, the Roman procurator of Judea, who we spoke about, became captivated by Drusilla's beauty, and with the help apparently of a Cypriot magician, he persuaded her to divorce Azizus and to marry him. Now this marriage was of course quite controversial, because Drusilla did marry him, but she was not properly divorced from Azizus according to Jewish law. They had a son. His name was, of course, Agrippa. I guess he would have been Agrippa III. But we're told that, tragically, this son died in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79. That's the same, event that destroyed the town of Pompeii, which is so famous. So he apparently died in that eruption, and we are given this information by the historian Josephus. The actual death of Drusilla herself is not recorded, but we understood she was alive at the death of her son in AD 79, which obviously means that her death came sometime after that, but we don't have the exact date. Now, the sources we have of this information comes from Josephus and his book Antiquities of the Jews. His book provides details about Drusilla's family, her marriages, and her son's death. We also have information from historians Tacitus and Suetonius. Those are two Roman historians who talked about Felix and also talk about the Herodian dynasty. And then, of course, we have archaeological evidence. These are coins and inscriptions from the period which confirm the existence and the status of Felix and the Herodian family. Okay, now let's turn to Berenice. As I said before, in your King James Bible, you will see her name given as Bernice, but as I said, the Jewish pronunciation, the Jewish rendering of the name is Berenice. That's the name I'll be using going forward because I like how it sounds. So Berenice, she is mentioned in Acts 25 and 26, and the events in that chapter are estimated to be around AD 59 to 60, again in the context of Paul's trials. So from chapter 25 and verse 13, it says, and I'll read again, after several days had passed, King Agrippa and Berenice arrived at Caesarea to welcome Festus. And then that's verse 13. Then verse 23 says, so on the next day, Agrippa and Berenice came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then Festus gave the order, and Paul was brought in. And of course, the story goes on to tell us about Paul's trial, his interview, so to speak, before Festus, Agrippa, and Berenice, and others who were there. So Berenice appears alongside her brother, Herod Agrippa II, during Paul's trial before the Roman governor Festus in Caesarea. She is present at the hearings and participates in the discussion about Paul's fate. Now, her family and early life, she was born about 10 years before her sister Drusilla, who we just spoke about. She was born in AD 28. So she was the eldest daughter of Herod Agrippa I and Cyprus. So this made her a member of the Herodian dynasty, and of course she was sister to Drusilla and Agrippa II. In terms of her marriages, her first marriage occurred around AD 41 at age 13. She was married to a man called Marcus Julius Alexander, who was a wealthy Jew of Alexandria. He died soon after they got married. I'm not suggesting anything there, that's just the cold facts of it. He died very soon after they were married. Then came her second marriage around AD 44 to 48. She married her uncle, Herod of Chalcis, with whom she had 2 sons. Now, this practice of marrying your uncle and your niece and so on was quite prominent, quite common in that Herodian dynasty. So this is not a surprise. So she married her uncle, Herod of Chalcis, and he died quite soon afterwards as well in AD 48. Again, nothing sinister being suggested there. However, after the death of her second husband, she had a very close relationship with her brother Agrippa II from AD 48 onward. She actually lived with her brother Agrippa II, and they had a very close relationship. In fact, it was so close that there were a lot of salacious rumors going around of an incestuous relationship. And it was just rumors. There's no substantive evidence to support it, but those were the rumors going around at the time, that they were having an illicit, inappropriate, incestuous relationship. But that's all just gossip. She later got married to a man called Polemon II around 48 AD, and this was apparently done to quell those rumors of the incest. So she married him briefly. He was actually the king of Cilicia, but that didn't last very long. She soon left him shortly thereafter and returned to her brother Agrippa II. Maybe the most famous of Berenice's relationship came with the Roman general Titus. Titus, you'll be familiar, was the general who led the siege and attack of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the destruction of the city and the temple. Yeah, that Titus. This is in the 70s AD, of course. And Titus eventually, as you also will be aware, eventually he became emperor of Rome in 79 AD. But Berenice became the lover of Titus, who was Roman general and future emperor. Now, this was considered to be quite scandalous at the time, again, because she was clearly much older than he. Maybe not much, but she was 11 years older than Titus. He would have been born in 39, while she was born in 28 AD. So she was 11 years older than he was. But at the time, this was considered fairly scandalous. She had a number of husbands before. He was a younger man, but they had their relationship, and she became his lover in the 70s. She actually left Judea and went and lived in Rome for a time, but these things have to end. Ultimately, when Titus became emperor, she was dismissed, and this is around AD 79, and she returned to Judea, apparently, at the age of 51. We are told that when the Jewish revolt started in 66 AD, and it lasted until 70, as you know, when the destruction of the temple, we are told that Berenice played a very prominent role during that revolt. In fact, it appears as though she attempted to mediate between the Jewish population and the Roman authorities. She attempted to see if she could broker some peace between them in order to prevent loss of life, apparently. Josephus records her courage and her political involvement during this period. Her later life after 79 AD, and after her dismissal by Titus, her life is a bit obscure. Not much is known about it. The date and circumstances of her death are also unknown. And all this information we get from Josephus. Again, his book Antiquities, which you mentioned before, that details Berenice's marriages, her political influence, and her role during the Jewish revolt. We have Tacitus. Again, his histories, he mentions Berenice's relationship with Titus and her presence in Rome. Suetonius and Juvenal, they both refer to Berenice's influence and the rumors surrounding her relationship with Agrippa II. And again, we have the same archaeological evidence, the coins and the inscriptions, which confirm the status of her Herodian family. So we come to today's lesson. What can we learn from the brief lives that we have discussed of Drusilla and Berenice? Now, as we mentioned, these two sisters were the daughters of King Herod Agrippa I. So they were born into a very powerful family, the most powerful family in Judea at the time. So theirs was a position of privilege and power. We see them in their privileged position when Paul is being tried, and they were there in position of rulership and in power, along with their husbands and their brother. And so these were two women who would have been used to a life of privilege. Now, I'm sure most of us watching this video, most of us don't consider ourselves to be privileged people. We probably figure we are pretty ordinary. We don't have any real power, so we just consider ourselves to be ordinary. So we wouldn't probably put ourselves in the category of being privileged. But we actually very likely are quite privileged, because many of us, particularly if we are able to be sitting down watching videos on YouTube, probably live a fairly comfortable life. And we have enough for our existence for the most part. Yes, we may have some debts to pay and so on, but we generally have enough for our existence, and probably have a little bit more as well. In fact, we probably have enough where we can share maybe a little bit without really noticing the difference. And that's really privileged, because when we think of people in other parts of the world who basically have nothing, who are barely subsisting, probably maybe homeless, maybe in poor physical condition. So compared to them, we are quite privileged. And in the lives of Drusilla and Berenice, we don't see anything particularly in Drusilla's life, we don't see anything recorded showing her of her showing any interest in helping others. We're just not told. Could have been that she did that. We're just not told. We're told nothing of her response to Paul's preaching. So quite often that's how many people are. They tend to enjoy their position of privilege without thinking about others. Berenice, on the other hand, though, did appear to show some interest in helping others, because, as was mentioned, she did try to use her position to help mediate in the Jewish-Roman war, and I would imagine she did so in an attempt to see if she can prevent further loss of life. So that's commendable on her part. And like her, I think we who have positions of privilege, as I mentioned already, should use those positions and to use the privilege we have to see if it can benefit others, to make a difference, a positive difference in someone's life. So yes, it might just be that we can spare some change to give to someone who needs it, or we can spare some extra food for someone who needs it, or something else, material help, clothing, or whatever that we can spare, because we are so privileged that we have enough that we can spare. And we should use that privilege to make a positive difference in the lives of those who really need it. And so I trust that by looking at the lives of Drusilla and Berenice, we can be reminded that if you are in a position of privilege and power, you should use that position to help others. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. I thank you so much for joining our class today. If this was the first time you joined, I'm glad you came, and I trust that what was said would have been interesting and instructive to you. And of course, those of you who keep coming back, I'm really thankful and appreciative of you. Remember, I would invite you to subscribe. I would invite you to share the video so that many more people can benefit from these lessons. Most of all, I want to encourage you, if you're not a Christian, to trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. That is what He wants. That's what we want. And we want to have you to have that fellowship with Him that He wants to have with you. As a Christian, remember, one of our responsibilities is to help those who are in need. So let's use our position of power to do so. Next class will be our penultimate class. I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, God bless you.